You ready?
I guess. Let's do it.
All right, this is the Venture Capital Podcast with Peter Harris and Jon Bradshaw. I'm Peter. This is Jon. Hey, Jon.
Hey.
Just kidding. Go to www.venturecapital.fm if you want to subscribe to other channels. Let's begin. So this week or the prior week, a developer came to me and was offered a CTO position.
Ooh.
It was kind of very unusual because they were asking the developer what he wanted his compensation to be the CTO. Personally, I saw that as a huge red flag.
Why? They're just like making him like set the bar, right?
Yeah. So you could just say from a standard, in most cases, I don't know. I would see this very non-traditional. Maybe not a bad thing. I feel like it was an aggressive sales move.
Yeah, I mean it's just a negotiation tactic.
Just a negotiation tactic. But so for this podcast, the question is how much should a startup CTO get paid? And we asked a handful of people. Some are founders, some are angel investors, some are VCs. And at the end, if we're lucky, the two of us will kind of give our opinion. So if you're looking to hire a startup CTO, here's just kind of different perspectives that different people have.
All right, but first you should give some context. All
right, so here's the background. So this individual has never been a CTO before. They're currently making $200,000 as a salary plus $50,000 in like equity and bonuses and other things like that.
Was it equity or is it bonuses?
I'm assuming the $50,000 is like 401k, might be bonus, equity.
Okay.
I don't know. It was really tricky when this person first came to me because they're like, what should I get? What should I ask for?
Yeah.
And I'm like, there is too much here that I don't know. I can't answer. And even with what we're going to share here, I think it's almost too vague for anyone here to give a true number.
Sure.
But I think it's good as a range.
Sure. All right. What's the rest of the context?
So they make $200,000, $50,000 in equity and other benefits. This individual is willing to take a salary of $150,000. The startup just raised $1 million from a quote unquote notable VC, which I have no idea what that means. I told him, I'm like, hey, I'll sign an NDA, give me more information, I can help you more. He was not willing to do that, which is totally fine.
Sure.
But the revenue I thought was interesting. They're doing less than 5,000 MRR.
Yeah. So like 60K AR.
Well, yeah. So I'm assuming it's less. I'm assuming they got one customer too, or like.
Yeah. Probably.
I just kept drilling and.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is it less than 5?
And if they have more than one customer, they're real small customers. Yeah.
So super, super surprised. It's SaaS, but I don't know anything else beyond that. So again, so many things are here. I don't know. No one on the team has ever sold a company before. That was one of the things I asked. Because I think if you, for example, Brandon and Jared Rodman, who started We, went public, are now starting another company.
Yep.
I'm assuming that cap table, if I were to join hypothetically, would look very, very different than joining like another startup.
Yeah. We're even joining Weave in the early days, right?
Mm-hmm. The startup is asking him to make an offer. Yeah, so that's the high level information of what we know.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're going to go through some of the responses. The first two are from Jon and Tyler Richards. They just raised a $20 million fund it's the Startup Ignition Fund. And they invest in seed pre-revenue companies. So I'm going to let's go through his points. I'll kind of read it and then we'll kind of jump in. But the first thing is he was surprised that a VC made the investment recently or before March 31st. He's surprised anyone did that after April 15th. So I don't know when the dates were, but I'm honestly surprised the individual raised $1 million with no prior exit history.
Yeah.
And that little in revenue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
but again,
without having more to go off of, I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side is, right, like we're looking at a deal that's got less than that, and they're going to raise it a lot more money than that at a higher round valuation. But they got a lot of other stuff going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
this
is a bit tricky there.
His point number 3, I think, is dead on. He says, I don't think a startup should be paying a guy $150,000 if he needs that kind of a salary. So I mean that one's debatable, but like $1 million doesn't go that far.
Yeah, you're gonna spend 15% of that. Well, really, once you add in like taxes and all that other business, I mean, yeah, they're gonna be like 16% of that $1 million out the door gone for the CTO for 1 year.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that number, I think personally, you want to get your burn way, way down.
Yeah. Well, especially in this environment. In this environment, you need to get that burn as low as possible, right? And extend that runway out as far as you can.
But I know it's tricky, but that would just be, I just know cash is king. And
Yeah.
I think I would spend more time trying to sell that individual on the vision.
You sure you're not just biased, though? You're like, what he really should do is hire code base.
Maybe.
And we could
Definitely
take care of them.
Oh, we could definitely crush someone out of the park. But yeah, so that's what they're currently looking at. And I know you don't do much in the seed space, but they've got 3 devs. So right there, 3 devs based in the US.
That's expensive.
That's easily a third to half of their entire raise.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So you see where I'm concerned, because
Yeah.
50% same product. I mean, assuming the CEO needs money, they're going to have other administrative expenses.
Yeah, they're going to burn that $1 million in a year.
They don't have sales right now to offset it.
Hey, they got 5 million or 5K.
So the next thing is Jon Richards gives us a graph, and he says this is how much salary versus equity that he thinks someone should get. And when I first saw this, it didn't make sense, but when I looked at it, he's basically saying, hey, if this person was saying I'm working for free,
Yeah.
Jon Richards is saying give him 20 to 35% of the company.
Yeah. In that role, he's kind of a co-founder, right? He's like putting some real risks, some real skin in the game. You know, he didn't start it, he didn't raise the money, but it sounds like he's a pretty necessary, piece of the overall pie. And so, yeah, I think I can see what Jon Richards is saying is like, hey, let's give this guy a meaningful chunk of equity in exchange for, you know, the effective 150,000 that he's kind of quote unquote investing in the company.
Yeah, I agree. Out of curiosity, when I was talking with this individual, I said one way to approach it, which I've only done once, I've never seen anyone else do, is I just plugged in a time value of money equation. How much is your current salary?
Yep.
How much is your discount? What's the current market rate?
Yep.
What's the current valuation? Okay, based upon this. And the actual number was far less. And at that point, we just didn't do a deal.
Yeah.
This individual was working at Facebook at the time. Because they're like, I need 30, 40%. And I'm like, it's me and another founder. We have 50%. We do this. Like, you're showing up when we already have significant traction. That's a very different part of the game.
Yep.
So the second part, he says, if you're going to take a salary of 4,000, 20%, 6,000, 15%, his borderline spot bad was pay the developer $10K a month and give them 10%.
So 120K a year and 10%. And he says that's bad. Why? Because like 10% is not enough, or
I don't know why he says this
120 is too
bad.
much.
I would assume that paying someone still 10K, I'm assuming he would try to bump them to another position, more equity, less cash.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting here is that at this stage, I would really be asking myself as the entrepreneur, like, do I need a full-fledged CTO? Right? And maybe he does, but if that's the case, what he really probably needs is a technical co-founder. And those aren't necessarily always the same thing, right? Like a CTO of a really big company, not even a really big company, like a company with, a couple hundred employees, is a very different individual than a CTO of like a startup where they're really a technical co-founder. So yeah, I think that's part of like one of the things that Jon's probably getting at is that, if you're going to bring this person in, they've got to be really invested. And if you're paying them like 150K and giving it like a huge chunk of the company, then, or not giving them a huge chunk, like you're just paying them, then they're really just like a mercenary. They're not, they're not like part of the company, if that makes sense. They're not sacrificing for it.
Wait, so I'm going to take my next comment back. Why it's borderline bad, if you read his next point, he says anything under 10% equity usually fails. So I would agree with that completely.
Yeah.
I think when people don't have double digits and they're not taking like a significant investment, there's like this bar where it has to be something consequential in their head. So if they have 2 or 3%,
well, it's all about risk and reward, right? Like bringing on a CTO and giving them 1% of the company at the Series C stage, like that's probably reasonable, right? And probably on market. But at that point, like the risk is so much lower, right? And that 1% could be already worth a lot of money, right? If company's worth like 300 million at that point, you're effectively like 1%, you're giving them $3 million, right? So that's very different. This company, I don't know, I'm spitballing here. Like if they raised $1 million, I don't know, maybe like, you're talking like $5 million post. So, that's, kind of valuing the business at $5 million. You give them 10%. It's not that much. So it's like $500K of equity if it's successful. And then you discount it there for like risk, like likelihood of actually achieving, that $500K or receiving it. It's probably like a super high discount, right? So,
so this is John Richards. He's been an investor for the last 20 plus years.
Yep.
He's had several very, very big hits.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's...
And like every good angel, he's also lost a lot of money probably on some other bets.
I think I have no idea if he's... My perception, guys, is that he's ahead.
Oh, I'm sure he's probably ahead.
So you don't have to win them all.
No, you don't. It's the game, right?
Okay. So Tyler is his co-founder on the new $20 million venture fund, Startup Ignition Ventures. So this is what he said. I asked them in like a group chat. He says, yeah, typically with high salaries, a CTO gets less equity. The higher the equity, the less salary. I mean, if everyone could get paid 6 figures and have 30% of a startup, wouldn't everyone be an entrepreneur? Which is, I think, is a very true statement. I think everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
They want the 30%. They're not willing to take the risk.
Not everyone's a full stack developer though.
But full stack is becoming much more common.
That's fair. And point taken, right?
Yep. So last month, he says they got a CTO for one of their portfolio companies. They landed on 10% and $100K in salary, and we thought that was a killer deal for the CTO.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's all situational.
Yeah, but the deals that they're not investing in a company that's 60K ARR either, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're investing in companies a little further along, so a little less risk on the table for the CTO.
Yeah, I think what they're suggesting here is, hey, give this individual 100K, 10% of the company.
I don't know. I'm kind of getting the impression they're saying like a lot less than that. Like,
potentially.
Pay him like, 75K, but then give him like 15%.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if your friend goes for that, right? Because it's like, I don't know. Like once you're making $200,000 a year, most people's expenses rise to meet their income, right? And it's real hard to start making those cuts, right? It's like, Johnny can't go to private school anymore. Got to sell the Tesla, Like, we suddenly became real house poor, right? Especially if they're not like plowing away lots of money into the savings account, right?
For sure. Now, before we show this next one, let me double check to make sure I'm allowed to share this individual's name. So this next one, I'm not sure. I'm looking at the text messages. I don't know if I've got implicit consent.
We don't have to talk about it. It's fine.
So we're just going to go through some of the points that this individual shared. So this individual runs a syndicate. They help. So typically what happens is someone will raise a VC round, and then he gets a syndicate of, if say the round's $1 million, then he tries to raise another $200,000, maybe 20% of the fund that goes in through a single LLC investment into the company. And that's what he does. Yeah. He's probably done both.
He basically just goes out and pools a bunch of money from, small angels and
5K, 10K, 50K checks.
Yeah, into one vehicle and then invests alongside other VCs. Yep.
Okay. So his point was he thought 150K in salary seemed a little high.
Yeah.
And I would agree with him on this. I think this is probably one of the best, besides John Richards, one of the best well-written responses he got.
Yeah.
And his main point is you need the cash to last more than 18 months. I think it's going to be, they raised once. I think it'll be hard for the startup to raise twice.
Yeah. Without like really good traction. Right. They need to go from, realistically, they probably need to minimum 10x where they're at.
Okay. It's also interesting that this individual said, don't give the person more than 8% equity. Is this the CTO that you're going to want for the next 5 years? And if so, he thinks that individual could ask for 8% equity.
As much as 8%.
But it's all, again, down to negotiations. I think those are the big parts, but we'll put like the screen conversation chat here so they can pause it and read the whole thing.
Yeah. Honestly, like I would be pushing for like a little bit higher, but I don't know. It's a little tricky. My thought process would be, I want somebody that's like in the trenches alongside me and like, making some sacrifices, but also gonna like, they're gonna win, I'm gonna win, we're all gonna win because we're all gonna win. You know what I mean? Like we're all equally aligned. So I feel like 8% might be a little bit low, but I also think 150 is definitely high.
Yeah, I'd like to see this CTO take 70 to 120, which I don't know if is even possible
70 to 120
for their annual salary.
Oh, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and equity.
Equity, I mean, depending on how much they're taking, 3 to 15%.
Okay, so you think that 8% is pretty reasonable?
Definitely. I mean, yeah. I mean, again, it's perspective. One of the things I noticed as I was talking to people is that VCs and investors typically gave higher numbers.
Yeah.
And founders were saying give like 3 or 5% typically.
Don't give anything away. Mm-hmm. It's yours. Yeah, that's fair. You also have to remember too that like this is going to be, this is not going to be all paid out at once, right? This is going to be vested over time. So part of me is also looking at this as thinking like, look, yeah, maybe you give like 10%, but it's going to vest over 5 years. So really they're getting 2% today. And if they don't perform, they ain't getting the other 8, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever it might be.
True.
And if they do perform, then you'll be thrilled to give them 10 because they will have been pivotal in helping your company succeed, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, next one. This one is Theyre Anonymous. This founder just raised about 1.5 to 2 million. So he said the salary of 150K he thought was fine, but that the founder should only get 0.5% to 1%.
Not the founder, the CTO.
So sorry, the CTO.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
I think that was way. I mean, again,
I think that's fine, but that feels like you're hiring a CTO at the Series B or Series C stage, and this is like pre-seed stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I definitely think the equity is definitely low, but again,
and the salary is kind of high.
It also depends on how competent of a CTO do you need.
Yeah.
So again,
and like, where's the product, right? Like, did you just like hack together an MPV, but now you need like a really scalable business product, right, to go sell? In which case, and you don't really have anyone else on the team that can do that, and you need them to build it, then that could be super valuable. But if you're just looking for somebody to like take what's there and, you know, add on to it and refine it and deal with some bugs and manage some people, like that's the kind of CTO that's getting paid, you know, 0.5% to 1% in equity, in my opinion.
Okay. This next person is a local angel. Again, we're going to keep his name confidential. He said he would give 1 to 3% in the 3% range.
Yeah.
And that 10% would raise
I think
eyebrows.
this is, you know, I know this individual and he's got some data sets that he's working off of. Mm-hmm. I think knowing what I know about those data sets is my guess is that they are biased towards later stage rounds.
Okay.
Again, because you don't need a quote unquote CTO, right? Until you're like much further on. This is like the CFO discussion. Like, when do you hire a CFO? Do you hire them at the seed stage? No. Do you hire them at the Series A? No. Do you hire them at the Series B? Probably not, right? When you get to like Series C, that's when you probably hire a CFO. Because up until then, you can get away with part-time CFOs and a VP of finance, right? Or an FP&A and then a controller. And I think about CTOs in a similar bucket, right? It's like, if you need someone to come in and like help architect things and also someone to come in and help manage and hire and like all of those things, that's what a CTO does. But you're usually not there until much later. When you're seed stage, like you need someone that's going to be like there in the trenches building, right? Taking care of bugs and like doing everything, right? Technical co-founder type role. And that person's probably not the right person when you get to the Series C stage, right? Usually what you see is, unless that person is just incredible, usually they're going to kind of move laterally or kind of down or whatever and really focus on what they do best, which is like coding and building, not necessarily hiring and managing and architecting, right?
Correct. And I think that's one of the big mistakes that a lot of startups make is we're like, this person's the CEO, this person's the CTO, this person's and they give them titles that then pigeonhole them in to being unable to replace them without offending someone.
Yeah.
And maybe someone be offended, hey, I'm the VP of product, and now you're bringing in a CTO, you know, that might or VP of development, and now you're bringing a CTO and you're not choosing me, they may be upset anyways. But I think it's one thing to strip a title, and it's another thing to not give them the title.
Yeah. But then again, you can use titles as, title inflation.
Yeah, it's
as a way of comp, right?
Mm-hmm. Which is what this individual wants. So like, John, I want to be a founder. Do founder shares mean anything different from regular shares? What's happening? I'm like, no, shares are shares.
Shares are shares. Well, I mean, there are certain cases where founder shares may be different, but for the most part.
For taxation and things like that.
Well, more for control, right?
Well, that's true.
But look, if he wants to be a founder, man, at this stage, there's no way he can go in demanding 150K, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Next one.
Especially if you've never been a CTO before.
Or
because that means like he's not going to be that instrumental in helping raise additional capital either.
All right. The next one, Aldone. Do you know Aldone?
Yeah.
What can we say about Aldone?
Mr. Quilts.
Mr. Quilts, Missouri Star Quilt Co.
Yep.
Do you think Al's a billionaire yet?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think Al's very smart though. He's
smart.
got a new little venture going.
I know. He says he'll have to come on the podcast soon.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's bring him on.
All right. Let me let you scan through this and we'll pause and then we'll let you talk about this one. Is that okay?
All right. So Al is basically saying he would do 150 plus some equity that feels reasonable. With only $1 million, I might be looking for 6 months or X milestones at 80K and a larger slice of equity just to help us stretch. And that really, you've only got these two levers of equity and salary, which I actually don't necessarily agree with. I think there's some more levers that you can play with, but generally, yeah, those are the two big ones, right? And yeah, maybe he starts with a reduced salary. Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree, right? I think he's in line with kind of some of the other stuff. I mean, he's saying that like 150 plus equity is reasonable, but I think he's thinking that equity is probably pretty small. I could be wrong. I mean, he doesn't actually say here. I do like some of his other ideas though, which is like, hey, let's play around with these levers, right? We don't have to go like all the way one direction or all the way the other. Like maybe what we do is we say, hey, for the next 6 months, we're going to just pay you with some equity and a little bit of cash, right, to help us stretch. Or maybe we'll pay you 75 now, but as soon as we close our next round, we'll bump you up to 150 or 200, right?
Or hit certain sales goals. Hey guys, you're 75K now. When we get to 20, 30,000 MRR,
we'll bump you up, right? Yeah. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to approach it. Yeah. I think one of the challenges too, and I don't know, I'm kind of reading a lot between the lines a little bit here, is that this feels like Al is saying, hey, look, if you're going to go just hire somebody, then yeah, sure, like 150 feels reasonable for a full stack developer to hire them and kick them some equity. But if you want like a co-founder, that's a very different conversation, in my opinion, right? And I think that's what the company kind of wants. I wouldn't be surprised if the company threw it back on him, like asked him to come and approach them because they're like, how badly does this guy want it? Does he want a job or does he want to be a founder? Right? And if he really is like passionate and he's got high conviction about like what we're building, what we're doing, then he would come back and he would like come in for a low salary or no salary and lots of equity because he's a huge believer. Like I have a friend, his company, he's got like 2 or 3 people that work for like nothing. In some cases, like one full stack developer, I think that literally works for nothing, just equity, right? That's super high conviction, right? And like he loves that, right? Because the guy is like in the trenches right alongside him because my friend is also not taking a salary out of this business, right? And that CTO or technical co-founder is like a real founder, right? And I think that's very different from just like, we're just going to hire somebody. I don't know. What do you think? You're the entrepreneur. You've been there, right? What would you rather have?
I'd rather have someone not taking a salary or like doing,
But would you be willing to give them like, 20 to 30%?
It depends.
On what?
It depends on their background. It depends if we'd worked together previously.
Yeah. So if they're good and you like and you like each other, you can work together. You got chemistry.
I mean, chemistry. So this is a slight detour, but startups are lonely.
Yeah.
Very lonely. And they said, I was texting someone today and they said the next time they do a startup, they want to start it so they have like the lion's share. And I made the comment because I've typically been like a solo founder and I'm like, solo foundership is lonely. Like I'd rather have someone that I'm friends with, that I'm in the trenches with.
Sure.
that I can have that camaraderie. Like I feel like I get that here kind of on the podcast a little, even though we're like, we record like twice a month, but like in startup land, it's just lonely.
Yeah.
It's all in my head.
Yeah. The wins are great, right? But
it's what percentage of the pie, right?
Yeah.
Is bringing someone on and giving up 10, 20, 30, 50, 60%. What does that actually do for your remainder?
Yeah. I don't know. I look at it like, would I rather own a bigger piece of a smaller pie or a pie that takes a long time to fully realize? Or would I rather own a smaller piece of a much, much bigger pie that I get to enjoy a lot sooner? And for me, I think I'd rather have the latter. Like I feel like I'd rather have a smaller piece, but build something really big and meaningful and do it relatively quickly, not take 20 years to build the business, right?
There's a lot that goes into a startup.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, your most valuable resource is your time, right? I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it's true, right?
We all only have so much time in startup land.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the lessons I learned when I was doing Tiny Torches. I bootstrapped it. Probably could have gotten on. Actually, yes, I rejected funding.
Yeah.
Which seemed like an actual legitimate like offer. Mm-hmm. But my trade-off was I spent 4 years bootstrapping that. Then the market / Facebook turned off the APIs and it killed us.
Yeah. Do you think you would have survived if you had raised money?
I think if we raised money, we were trying to diversify the risk, and we were looking to build complementary features. At that point, we started around similar times as Canva.
Yeah.
And Canva raised and we didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't think Canva would ever seen us as a competitor, but like that was the area we wanted to go to.
You wanted to get there, yeah.
And because we didn't raise, we just could never keep up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like Buffer, because you were pretty similar to Buffer too. Like they're still around.
We were looking at doing
raised.
like a combo, having scheduling and designs built in.
Right.
So you could just design, publish.
Yeah.
We were more of like a digital asset management tool, and where you could publish. So it was just adding the layered editor, the content creation tools on it.
Yeah.
The collaboration pieces.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah, that business died. All right. Jared Rodman, he gave me the thumbs up so we can say his name. He is a founder of Weave, took a company public. He's saying, regardless, give them 5 to 20%. Right?
Just giving it out, making it rain. Million raise is small, revenue is small, team is small.
But giving up 20%, I think, would be tricky because the investor might have 20 or 30%, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did our math right, like assuming generous, like 20% ownership.
Okay.
So founder, if assuming that they haven't given up any ownership to anybody else, then they're gonna chuck another 20%. Now they're down to 60%.
And there's a couple other people at the startup already, which means they might go below the 50%.
Like 50%, yeah. Which is tough at this stage, for sure.
Yeah, he's saying 5 to 20%. The last one is a recruiter, which the things that Craig said totally blew my mind. I've never heard this, but totally could be market, but I would be surprised. So I think the thing that surprised me is he says,
don't take the haircut.
He says, give them $175,000, and then of the equity you give them, allow them to vest 30 to 50% immediately. And I wanted to yell treason.
Why?
I think equity is a thing that's earned, and I don't know, especially in this size, someone who could walk away with 2 or 3% after a few months will forever affect your startup and your ability to raise. May forever affect you.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but at the same time, it's kind of like hire slow, fire fast. He's taking it so far. I think what's interesting is we're kind of approaching it from like the startup perspective. Right? Like if you're the startup, what would you accept? And he's taking it from the angle of like, if you're going to leave your cushy job for 200, like, and take all this risk, what should you be willing to, take? And, I think that's why he's saying, don't skimp on your salary, right? Get paid what you're worth. Because this thing, your equity is probably not going to be worth anything.
Yeah. So if that's the case, totally see that angle. 175K, that's only
25K, well, plus his other 50, 75K worth of total comp sacrifice.
It's like a 12% pay cut.
And he's saying you should argue really hard that 30 to 50% vests immediately so that you don't get canned at month 11.
Which is another podcast that we'll be doing shortly.
Sweet.
So yeah, when I saw this one, I got angry. I'm like, God, I hate this one. Vesting immediately. It's going to mess up the cap table.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Snapchat, right? Their vesting schedule is like 0 full cliff at 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So like you're there grinding for 4 years, 4.5 years or whatever. And like you get canned or you leave or whatever. Nothing. You get nothing.
Have vesting schedules changed?
Over time?
Are they, because they were 4 years. I've heard some people say that they're 6 years with a 2-year cliff.
I don't know. They're kind of all over the place. I think standard is still kind of like, 4 years, quarterly cliffs. So.
No, you mean quarterly vesting with the
Or sorry, quarterly vesting with annual cliffs. Sorry, I was just thinking, every 4 years, or every year for 4 years.
And the last one would be our friend Diogo. He said we could share his name. He's with album.vc, and he said he'd probably give away 3 to 10%. And in the past, when I've asked him like, hey, what would be a good CTO when he hasn't seen this? What's a good CTO paycheck? And he said 150K.
Yeah.
Which I'd probably go out of all of them. So in my conclusion, I would probably say if I had to pick something, you're making 150K, probably 5 to 7 is probably where I'd target personally.
Yeah. I think 150 plus 5 to 7 is like totally reasonable for somebody you're hiring at this stage. And for him, like that's enough equity that it's like meaningful and enough pay that you're not taking too much risk. And yeah, I think it's fair. But I think you're getting a hire. You're not getting a founder. Right.
Very, very potentially. So anyways, that was...
Here's a question. Like, let's say this was you. How much would this change, like, what they ended up offering you? How much would this change, like, your view and how hard you'd work and all those things? Like, do these things, like, change your behavior or not?
I'm in a very different camp, so this... I don't know how to answer that. Like, I'm like an all or nothing.
If I came to you, I'm like, Jon,
I believe in being...
I need you for my new startup, and you could add a ton of value, and here are your options. You could make 150K and like 7% equity, vesting over 4 years, blah, blah, blah. Or I'll give you 25% of the business, but I'm only going to pay you like, I don't know, $2,000 a month or something. What do you take?
I mean, the 25% would be more appealing to me by the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
But I would just say, based upon what I'm doing at Codebase, it'd be a bad offer.
Yeah, but you don't know my idea. My idea is like huge. It's gonna like change the world. Like,
I mean, like
we're gonna disrupt Google.
Like ideas that are like, what would I leave Codebase for?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like the one that I thought was pretty cool lately was Dree. Do you know Dree?
Yeah.
And
laundry.
Yeah, they do. They're like Uber for laundry.
Yeah.
And I think their idea is awesome. I think the amount of traction they've got in the first year is awesome. And I think part of it is I get lonely sometimes as a founder.
Okay.
Because it's very difficult to talk to you when you got a founder, you can talk on a different level.
Yeah. But it's hard to find people that empathize, that can empathize, right?
Because we were having a discussion between my business partner here at Codebase and an employee last night, and he was like, "Why are we doing these things at Codebase? It doesn't make sense. I feel a little micromanaged. You know, when I first started, there was like 10 people. Now we're at 40 plus." And he's like, "We didn't do any of these things." And so we had to then walk him through and said, "Hey, these are things that are happening. And this is when, you know, like if a client were to downsize, often you guys have no idea. You just think you switch projects.
Right.
But you don't realize like Codebase may have been subsidizing your salary. You know, like the earth was like flying apart and Codebase just made this very nice, smooth story for you.
Right.
And you can't share that with employees."
Right. No, it is. It's totally lonely, right? And even if you have a co-founder, right, that doesn't always mean that it's still not lonely.
And I think it's tricky to find people who can compete at the same level.
Sure.
And then also it's also like you also just have like a lot of sunk costs, but in our mind, sunk costs are big.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how much time I've like spent a ton of time on Codebase. I've spent a lot of time on appointment.
Yeah.
And switching is like giving up your baby.
I think though, like you make a good point in that like, hey, you've got something right now that's like real, right? Solid revenue, blah, blah, blah. And if you're going to be a founder, you kind of have to be a little crazy, right? And that's why, there aren't a lot of founders at the end of the day that are like end up being successful. And, because I think the really bright, rational people, like they go pursue like traditional standard careers, that's like be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an investment banker, do private equity, right? Like, do management consulting, whatever it is, if you're really bright. But like, it's the crazies that are like, hey, I'm really smart or smart enough, and I'm going to take this insane risk that is totally irrational. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go without a salary, but I want a third of the business, right? And I'm going to go like full steam to build this thing into something big. And most likely they're going to fail, but like when they hit it big and they succeed, then it becomes like a massive success, right? And then everybody's like, oh, well, it's obvious that Google would be one day like this huge thing. And, you know, it's not fair that Larry's worth, you know, like $100 billion, right? But it's like, well, how many other crazy people were willing to take those risks, right?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, so I think for me, I either like to be the humble dictator, and I'd like to assume I'm humble, and maybe I'm not humble.
The benevolent dictator?
Maybe benevolent. Or I would be in the, say, like the 10 to 30% range.
Yeah.
In order to get knocked off. And if there's not a benevolent dictator at a startup and someone was trying to recruit me, I would never join, probably.
Yeah.
Anyways, too much politics.
This stuff's interesting. Hopefully this was helpful to you as you're trying to figure out, you know, what do you comp your co-founder? What do you comp that CTO or technical hire you need to make? What do you think? Send us thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, are we greedy? Are we
way off base?
Are we too generous? Let us know. Leave in the comments below. Go to venturecapital.fm. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on our next episode.
See ya.